I was just addicted to the numbness and pain, actually. I'm not feeling any joy. I'm just feeling the numbness and I am just feeling addicted. That's all I
Mm.
feel. Gambling almost every day. It was the only thing that could distract me from my very painful situation that I was in at the time. I think it's a miracle that I stopped. It's really painful. It's so hard.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the One Day at a Time podcast. Today's guest is Jiji. She's from France and she works in data. She's also in recovery from a gambling addiction. Jiji, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate being here. In all support group meetings, I would start with saying, "Hi, name's Gigi, compulsive gambler." Today's context is a bit different. So, name's Gigi, compulsive gambler, recovering from gambling addiction, and I have been bet-free for, well, 2 years, almost 2 years, apart from a short slip last year. So I'm here to share my story and break some stigmas around gambling, the addiction, recovery, and tell you guys about myself and hopefully reach out and help people this way.
Well, congratulations on 2 years in recovery. That is an amazing accomplishment. And I think that a lot of people watching, I think we should just address the elephant in the room. You
Yep.
don't look like the typical gambling addict. How
Yeah,
did
I
you,
uh,
how did you get started with gambling?
I started gambling in 2020, right before COVID. So I was on the trip with one of my best friends at the time and some of my previous classmates from middle school. So I hadn't been in touch with them for a long time. And during that trip, it was supposed to be the New Year's trip, and we went to the casino. So it was mostly a casino trip, and I have never done any gambling or betting in my life before. I have always been a bit impulsive. I do like risks, I do like adventures, but I never thought of gambling as anything that could be bad or dangerous, especially for myself. So we were there, and while I started gambling, something really horrible happened. I was sexually assaulted. And so when I came back from the trip and COVID hit, and I was in lockdown in Paris at the time, and that's when my gambling got really, really bad. And I had realized that, well, I was practically gambling to escape all the trauma that this trip has caused, just because the activity itself was something I have never experienced before. I mean, the rush of dopamine, the intensity, the thrill, that's something I have never ever experienced in my life before, and I don't think I ever will. It is like a drug. I mean, I initially did not know about is that you could get addicted to gambling. There is no physical dependence, or, well, gambling cannot kill you. It's not a substance. So if you abuse it, it's not going to kill you, but the damage it can cause and it has caused is very real. And so that's how I started gambling. And I was a casino gambler. So I've never done sports betting in my life, so it was physical casinos and then online. Because in France, online casinos are technically illegal. You can access them, but you are not protected by the law. So in France, is either you go to the physical casinos, they're not in Paris, lucky for me. You have the government accredits Française des Jeux, which is the FDJ, which is the basically the nationwide gambling institution. I don't know how to say it, but everything is under their control. So I self-excluded. I took that initiative over 2 years ago, and because of that, that was easy for me to do. I started gambling to, oh, I think I have an addiction, to I need help, to self like banning myself from casinos, to joining the support group online. It has been quite a journey, to say the least. First of all, as you has mentioned, I do not look like the cliche gambler. I think when I was in casinos, unfortunately, and a lot of the gamblers I saw were retired people. You know, they lived in those beach towns, they lived in those vacation towns, and I did see a lot of older people gambling and not a lot of women. And I think even stereotypically, when I looked up gambling addiction, I would mostly see men. I come from China, and we know in China and in Hong Kong, there are a lot of celebrities who gambled, and it was a big problem. It still is a big problem, and a lot of them are men that we get to see pictures. And even after joining the support group, there are not a lot of women in the group, and especially I think I'm the only young woman there. I'm in my 20s. So I think when I first realized, oh, my gambling is problematic, because I was gambling all day long. I think I was very lucky because I never ended up in debt. And actually, compared to some fellow gamblers, I did not lose as much money. So sometimes I think at the beginning I would feel not legitimate enough to want to be in recovery, not legitimate enough to call myself an addict. Because I feel like, oh, I hear people who are addicts, they lose all of their savings, they go into debts, they lose everything they have. And I haven't lost that yet. But I just remember gambling almost every day, and it was the only thing that could distract me from my very painful situation that I was in at the time. I realized that from the first time I went to the casino, I couldn't stop chasing losses. I think when you look up symptoms of signs of having gambling addiction, that's one of the signs that come up. And that was the first one I realized is even during my first trips to casinos, when I would lose money, I would always want to win that back. And the second thing is I could never stop. I never knew when to stop. I think over time, I had realized that, okay, financially, this is getting a lot, but also emotionally. Emotionally, I think it's something that people don't really realize is that the biggest losses in gambling are not always money. Yes, the main symptom and the main physical loss that you have in gambling addiction is financial loss, but I was emotionally just in shambles. If I look at myself from 2 years ago, from 3 years ago, I don't think I'd recognize myself because I was in such a place where every day I lived to gamble. I think I would wake up, want to gamble, and always look forward to the next bet, next bet. That wasn't really active addiction. And so I realized something is probably wrong with my behavior, with my gambling habits. So I started looking resources online, looking to see, if there was anything wrong with me. So yeah, I think after a while, I did look up, oh, is my gambling problematic, gambling addiction, all those Google searches, and I did stumble across the French website called Infojoueur, which is the website for gamblers. They have just like for ads for alcohol or cigarettes, you have the mandatory warning, oh, be moderate with your habits, be careful of this, it can lead to addiction, it can lead to health problems. They had the same for gambling. So right now, if you go to the subway, the metro, if you see ads for sports betting apps, you will see that little warning at the bottom. If you have any problems, call this number, go to the website, and that would be the website that I went to. And on that website, they would have the classic signs you might have problematic gambling, and then they would have what to do. And so, what to do, it would be budgets your spendings. It would be limit your time. But the main points were basically the idea that they were trying to tell you is control yourself. And at the time, I thought, okay, I didn't really know it was an addiction. So I was, okay, my gambling is problematic. I need to control myself. I'm going to limit the time I spend on the websites or limit my budgets. And it was impossible. It was impossible, I think. I think my brain was just hypnotized by gambling. I just remember the slots. So I was blackjack and slots, but I can't even describe it now that my brain is kind of out of the active addiction. But even now when I get small triggers, when I see, for example, on Instagram or YouTube, like an ad for gambling and I see the slots, a little part lights up. And I just remember when I was in active addiction, it was my whole brain lit up like a Christmas tree, and I felt like I was starving, and no matter how much I was fed, it was never enough. That feeling of having a scratch that I can't, the itch I can't scratch, and the feeling of never enough, I need to go further and further and further. At some points, gambling was not even fun anymore. I think I was so numb, and I liked the numbness because I said it helped me escape from reality. It helped me be quiet in my brain. But at that point, I realized that what the website said, limit and control yourself, be moderate, that was basically impossible. And now looking back, I think it is the most useless thing you can say to a gambling addict who is in active addiction. You can't just limit your gambling. You can't just control it or with your willpower because it is an addiction. It is an illness. It is a disease, and that needs to be addressed.
So thank you for sharing all that. I wanted to go through and ask a couple of follow-up questions throughout the story. So in the beginning, it began as a way to escape, a way to quiet down the
Yes.
mind. Why did you choose gambling rather than drinking or drugs? What drew you into playing on the slots?
So I was never much of a drinker. I drank very occasionally, and never use drugs. And gambling, I didn't expect it to be my getaway, and it just happened. It just happened. So I got hooked on it, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. So it just and slowly and slowly it started to take over all of my time, my energy, well, the money for sure, but it started to replace my life as a whole. And I think during that time, during COVID, I had university, I had school and stuff, but it was just a bit empty, and it was all online, so gambling was easy. I think it was like a giant monster that I started eating everything in my life. I used it as a very unhealthy coping mechanism. I didn't choose to use it. I guess it just happened. I get that some people don't get addicted and some people do. Unfortunately, I'm one of those who got addicted. And I remember at the time I started seeking outside help. I started seeking professional help. I went to see in France, we have those psychiatrists who are specialized in addiction and everything. And even on the hospital or the clinic websites, they would talk about addictions mostly with substances. And
Mm.
gambling is sometimes mentioned, but when I went to seek help, they told me to, oh, replace your gambling with another activity. And I tried. I tried. Nothing comes close to it. Nothing
Mm.
comes close to it. I tried also those fake mobile games, I guess, where you get slots but not with real money, and it's different. It's just different.
Yeah.
You don't really get the same high with a placebo or with a fake one with a
Mm.
trade-off, and that's what it was. I was completely hooked on it, and I had no idea how to stop. I wanted to stop. I didn't know how. I didn't know if I could ever stop. The idea that I'm gonna be like this my whole life was dreadful. It was so scary. At the time, part of me thought, okay, well, this is it. I'm just a damn addict and I deserve this. I deserve to go all the way down. I deserve the rock bottom. Yeah, I think I was very suicidal as well. That is something I realized that I was not alone in until after I joined the support group. It is a topic that a lot of gamblers have experienced, being suicidal. The depth of despair and the pain that gambling can cause, not gambling, but the addiction can cause, is as real as any other addiction or mental illness.
So where did you first go to find help online?
When I first went online, I started looking for local resources. So the one based in Paris. There was the website for the gamblers made by the government, and also sought out professional help, and those didn't work. So I felt like, oh, I'm not the only problem gambler here in France because I have seen a lot of them when I went to the casinos. So Reddit ultimately was where I found the help that I needed. So Reddit was it was the first time I saw people talk about their addiction
Mm.
so openly, and it was the first time I felt that I wasn't alone. Because in the casinos, I have met gamblers who clearly had a problem. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos, the memes of the old people, banging the slot machines and everything. I've seen that with my own eyes. I've seen that in all my casinos. And then they were people, who were quite elderly. And I realized, wait a second, I'm like them. That I don't show it because I want to keep my composure. But I was just like them. And so I thought I must not be the only one. And so on Reddit, seeing people talk about their desperation, their pain, and their attempts to stay abstinent from gambling, and people who have failed, people who have succeeded for a bit or longer, that was quite discouraging. And then I found Jeff's resource, support group from that subreddit, and yeah, that's when I joined. And my thought that I would need a reason to stop, or I would need an exterior force to pull me out of this, never really happened. I just stopped and never went back. I think it's a miracle that I stopped because I have no idea how anyone can get out of active addiction. It's really painful. It's so hard.
One thing that I found fascinating as you were telling this story is the times that you've compared to others about money lost. A lot of
Yeah,
times questions that I get are how much money did you lose gambling? And I hate it because it kind of makes you think that the severity of a gambling problem is measured on how much money you lost.
absolutely. Yes.
How did
Yes.
you track how bad things were getting for you? Was there a measure that wasn't money?
Yes, money was the most obvious one. Obviously, I was losing more than I could afford. But then, as I said, when I compared myself to other gamblers, I was like, I'm not losing that much. I still have money. I still, I'm not in debt. I was stealing, from my loved one. I was lying. I was using their trust. I wasn't myself anymore. So, yeah, at some point I realized, wait, this isn't who I want to be. This isn't who I am. And also, the biggest measure is how painful it was. Not just about the losses. Of course, when I lost, when, I spent the equivalent of a paycheck within like minutes or something, that hits, my heart would just sink. But that wasn't the biggest one. I think the moment I realized, okay, this is really, really something bad and I need help, is when I was gambling and I realized I don't feel any joy anymore. I just feel the numbness and I am addicted to this numbness.
Wow.
And that was the turning point where I was like, oh crap. Because before that, I would brag to people about my gambling wins. Because, casino sometimes it's cool. You go in like a VIP, they give you free cocktails, the ego, you get really like, and online casinos, you have the status and everything. And so I was like, I won money. I won X amount in X time and stuff. And that's cool.
Mhm.
And also young people, we do have more access to gambling methods and content nowadays with crypto and everything. I was never into that, but yeah, it just seemed to like something cool, like maybe not cool, but like something normal to do. And then when I realized, oh, I'm not feeling any joy, I'm just feeling the numbness and I am just feeling addicted. That's all I
Mhm.
feel. The feeling of being hooked and not being able to stop.
So in the beginning, the gambling gave you a sense of pleasure and
Yes.
escape, but at the end, it was just numbness. Is that
At the end,
fair?
too, yes, it was numbness and self-destruction. I think, like a lot of problem gamblers, I also deal with other mental health issues, and gambling was just a reflection of all of that condensed. It allowed me and enabled my self-destructive patterns in the worst way possible.
Mm,
I think by the end, I felt like I deserved to be gambling.
mm,
So the sentence "I deserve to gamble" changed from "I deserve to gamble, I deserve a break, I deserve to have my shot at getting some quick money, or I deserve to have some fun," to "I deserve to gamble because I deserve to die," or "I deserve to gamble, I deserve to continue to be stuck in this addiction because I lied to people, because I'm a bad person, and
mm.
because I'm never getting out of this."
Do you still deal with those feelings today, or has it gotten better?
It's gotten much better. Over the 2 years of recovery, I've also changed a lot because recovery, I've learned that recovery is not just about staying abstinent. It's also about improving other aspects of my life, rebuilding the relationships that my gambling has, ruined or damaged. It really forced me to think about what life I want, what kind of person I want to be. So yeah, that definitely went away a lot. I mean, I still have some times where I get quite self-destructive, the negative thoughts and spiraling down those dark holes. I now know that there are other ways than gambling. I am able to cope with these hard and difficult feelings in other ways than gambling, or other unhealthy ways that I used to cope with them. And I'm very grateful and lucky for that, because recovery played a big role in my overall self improvements and recovery in other mental illnesses and aspects of my life.
Mm. What are your coping mechanisms now when you're having a bad day?
So when I joined the support group and when I stopped gambling, when I had very bad days, or when I would have panic attacks or really big emotional crises, I would often resort to other ways of emotional self-harm or self-destructive patterns, such as, lashing out on the people I love,
Mm,
kind of pushing people away, or doing things I know would harm myself, my life, let's say, make bad decisions, or intentionally putting myself in danger, or do stuff I know that will make my loved ones go away or hate me. And now I think the real change happened about a few months ago when I started doing deep work on my traumas and everything. I've been learning how to self-regulate and self-soothe. It's really like those buzzwords from therapy and psych content online, but basically it's, I think, getting out of active addiction and being in recovery really helped with knowing that I can do this, and also having the community. I cannot thank enough the support group and the community and the friends I have there. The most inspiring people I have met in my life, they remind me that we can get out of this, because people there relapse. I have relapsed too, and every time, the fact that we relapse and we come back to meetings and we come back to recovery, we come clean to the people we love, we take concrete action roadblocks to prevent ourselves from going back to the addiction. It's something that I am so incredibly inspired by, and something that I really admire in this community. And also, it just reinforced the idea that if they can do it, I can do it, and I have done it. And I think last year when I had my very short slip relapse, it was 10 minutes, but it still is a relapse. And I was able to come clean about it. I realized, okay, something is not right with my prevention plan. I worked on that. And also, it really planted a seed in me that's like, I deserve to not be, in this addiction. I deserve to have a life that I want. And if I think I deserve it, I need to work towards it. There's a difference between, when I wanted to stop gambling, I would do anything to stop. And then when it actually comes to the work, you need to stop, you're like, it's hard work. So, but knowing that I can do it, that's a big part. Feeling like, okay, I've done this before, I can do it. Or no matter what challenge may come in the future, I trust that I'll deal with it, and that I have the support system that I very likely have that I need. I have the tools and the strength in me to deal with anything that might come in the future, and whether that be another relapse or other issues. And I think being in recovery for gambling addiction really and tremendously helped with that.
That's amazing. If I was to put you in a room with every leader of every government on the planet, why should they care about problem gambling?
Okay, I don't want to go too political or controversial, but I think we all know that our governments do profit from gambling. So I work in data, but I used to work in the art markets, and I did art history studies and everything. And in France, it's a great country for culture and cultural heritage and arts. We have a lot of abandoned or not restored monuments. And every year there is a big lottery system that's called the Heritage Program and everything. And it's scratch tickets. And every profits from that scratches goes to funds to restore these buildings and everything, which is great. But then it's from people who gamble. The money comes from gamblers. And I know currently the French government is talking about laws to enable online gambling. That would be devastating, I guess. I mean, I'm pretty sure it would be devastating for a lot of fellow French gamblers. Bonjour. Governments should care, because it is, and it is a big problem. It is an epidemic. I mean, young people nowadays, we have so much more access, as I said, to a lot of gambling methods. We get bombarded with ads and content about gambling and sports betting, and yet nothing about the prevention or awareness of the addiction. I think that's really dangerous. I mean, we all know the power of doom scrolling, the power of, mobile content addiction. Gambling is like another level of that. It comes with it, I guess, now that we have all these access. Governments should care. I don't know if they will, because they do make a lot of money with that. They do tax a lot from the gambling industries. I do hope that, at least, for example, in France, because that's what I'm most familiar with, we have more resources to help gamblers. Instead of having websites saying, oh, limit your spending, budgets, the money you lost, don't spend more than you can lose, that is too late. That's too late for a problem gambler. If you're starting to gamble, it's important to know these things, because gambling is an entertainment. I guess people who don't get addicted, they do enjoy it, and that's cool for you. But for people who realize they might have a problem, that's really not helpful. We need concrete resources, help. We don't really have GA here. Maybe a system like this would be helpful. We need to talk about the addiction more and more. I think online there are so many people who kind of troll and make fun of people who choose to stop gambling, who are like, I have a gambling problem. People are like, bro, just spend more money. You're just this away
I
from
know.
the big win. And the thing is, we have most problem gamblers will tell you, we have seen the big win. We
Mhm.
have won big. The problem is we can't stop.
One thing that we had talked about prior to getting on
Mhm.
this call was that you view gambling addiction as the silent addiction, the hidden addiction.
Yes.
When you were gambling, did anyone around you know how bad things were?
No, my friends knew I was gambling. We went on a trip, another trip after the really bad trip, and I would just spend my time in the casino. And I think some of them realized, oh, something is wrong, but never really checked in. They never really. I don't blame at all. We don't talk about it. Sometimes I would tell my friends, oh, I was gambling, or sometimes people were worried. I don't think anyone knew the extent of it. I think maybe my parents did. They knew I was losing money. They knew I was winning money. They knew that I was spending time on it, but I don't think anyone knew how bad it was for me on the
Mm,
insides. I don't think anyone knew that I was suicidal. I don't think anyone knew that I was gambling kind of to self-destruct. I don't think anyone really knew that. I think people were still seeing me. I mean, people who knew I was gambling were like, "Oh, she's gambling because it's fun or it's addictive." But at the end, as I said, I wasn't addicted to the activity itself. I was just addicted to the numbness and
mm.
pain, actually.
So, to someone that might be watching this that can relate to that, they're right now struggling, they're hiding it from friends and family, they are living the silent addiction. What is the value for them in telling someone about what they're going through?
I think it's hard to tell people around you that you're gambling. I felt a lot of shame after the feeling of, oh, I'm gambling, I'm winning money, and after I realized it's bad, I felt this immense amount of shame, and I felt like I'd rather, lose so much, go to rock bottom, and myself than tell anyone, let them know that I was, really pathetic being who's addicted to gambling. So I understand that people are scared to tell their close ones, especially if, they might be financially involved. Maybe you have borrowed, lied, or steal to them. It's not an easy thing to do. I myself making this video, my loved ones told me not to do it because
Mm,
they thought it gives a bad image. I'm about to start a new job and I'm very proud of. They didn't want people to know that I was recovering from such a shameful addiction because we don't talk about it.
mm,
So, to people who are watching who are not sure if they want to tell their loved ones because maybe you're scared, maybe you don't know what to do, maybe you don't know if they're going to support you or not, if you decide to tell your loved ones, I can guarantee they'll have a good reaction. I mean, you probably lied to them or, they're worried. I couldn't expect my loved ones to react in a way that I wanted to. However, there are resources out there. There are support groups like the one that I found. If you're in the US or the UK, you have GAs. They might not be the perfect solution, but it could be a good start. I think in a support group, we've all told each other things we would never tell loved ones.
mm,
Because support groups or other communities, or I know some people also come from rehab, especially for gambling and other forms of community-based, well, solutions, I would say, is that you're with people who went through the same thing as you. I think that is something that I didn't really believe in the first place because I felt like, well, I'm a young woman in my 20s. Not that people are like me. And a lot of people go from sports betting, crypto, or, they have been gambling for decades, some only for a few weeks, some have lost everything, some not so much. We all have different lives, but then the stories are so similar. The addiction is in its core very similar for everyone. And in that similarity, in that shared pain, in that shared, loss, I'd say we kind of find our support. We learn from each other. You can learn from other fellow recovering gamblers, and you're not alone. You really are not. I think if you are gambling and you're not sure if you have a problem, if you feel like you have a problem, it's never too late, but it's also never too early to reach out for help, to tell
mm.
people around you. It could be telling your friends, hey, I'm gambling a lot lately, or watching sports make me feel, I need to spend money on the betting apps. If you get concerned about a loved ones, tell them, ask, and reach out. It's a lonely addiction, I think. And I think connection and having people around you, having a support system can make a difference, can really make a difference. I think that, without the support group that I have right now, Jeff's support group, I wouldn't be here. I think I would have tried to stop on my own again and again. I probably would have succeeded for months, but then abstinence is not the only part of recovery. People are here to remind you why you're here. People are here to support each other, to hold each other accountable. Accountability, that's a big part that you don't have on your own. To be accountable, you need to have people around you, and you watch out for each other, you care about each other. Rebuilding relationships with your loved ones, with your life on your own, it can feel a lot. It can feel like a lot. I have to rebuild my life. I have to take away this giant wall that's taken all of my life, and what I'm going to do without it. Oh, I have to deal with my problems now. I have to deal with my losses, the financial loss. I have to deal with my estranged partner, my kids, my empty life. It's not an easy thing to do, but yeah, reaching out would be a first step.
You had mentioned that, coming up on this new job, there was a little bit of concern that talking about being in recovery could produce some shame or some stigma. In regards to that shame and stigma, as a society, do you think we should be working towards reducing that? And if so, why?
Okay, that's a great question. Yes, so I'm about to start a new job after job hunting and finding out what I'm good at and what I'm passionate about. This was done with recovery, of course, because if I was still in acid addiction, I wouldn't have done that. But my loved ones were worried that, if my employer see this, if someone is at a bar and they say, "Oh, I'm not drinking anymore," hopefully you wouldn't be like, "Oh, you were an addict," or "Ooh, you're gonna whisper and gossip about it." You probably think, "Okay, that's cool. You don't drink," and that's it.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I hope people are like that. And for gambling, so if someone says, "I'm in recovery for gambling addiction," why would that be different? For me, at least, in my prior perception and from what I've heard, is that people don't realize it is an addiction, and
Yeah.
it's not as real as the other addictions. As I said, there's no substance involved. You don't go to the hospital because you've gambled too much. You
Mhm.
can't die or get hurt if you gamble too much. All the pain, it's mostly invisible if you don't pay enough attention, if you hide it well enough, or if you're a high functioning gambling addict. In my previous perception, gambling addiction is an inability to control yourself. This person cannot control his finances or time, or this person cannot stop on their will, and that makes them weak. There is this character judgment that comes with gambling addiction that is hopefully slowly being removed from other substance addiction, and it's time we do that with behavioral addictions as well, including gambling. I think it is important to bring awareness to people that gambling was made to be addictive. I think we've seen a lot of content on how social media are like slot machines, like the mechanisms, the UX UI for the tech people out there. And gambling, we've heard about how casinos do like to keep you in the casinos, to keep you spending more. We know it's addictive.
Mhm.
But when we see someone who is addicted to it, we think it's their problem. It's their problem that they're addicted. It's their problem they can't stop. And so when someone is saying, "Oh, I'm recovering for gambling addiction," first of all, I have never heard that in my life from anyone
Mhm.
except from the support group. I don't think it's something we say to people. I'm in recovery for gambling addiction. Instead of maybe thinking, "Oh, this person probably has lost everything. Maybe this person, is bad with money or has done this or that." It's also important to remind yourself that this person is trying to move past that. This person is doing their best
Mhm.
to break out of this addiction. It is an addiction, and addiction is the word we need to put the emphasis on. You don't get out of addiction by snapping your finger. You don't get out of addiction by saying, "I'm gonna stop," and then you stop. Recovery and stopping. There's so much work behind it, so much efforts that it's not just "I want to stop" and that's it. It's much more than just wanting and willpower. People need help, they need resources, they need support, medical professional help. They're all part of recovery. These things need to be made more available and accessible to people, reducing the stigmas, the shame around it, so that when someone realizes to have a problem or maybe asking, they don't feel ashamed to ask people around them. They don't feel ashamed to talk to people because they're worried that automatically their friends or loved ones will view them as a bad or weak person.
Mhm.
So I think in breaking those stigmas, including the cliche gamblers, it's gonna be helpful, and hopefully, I hope so. I think it will help prevent the addiction and allow them to have the means and capacity to go into recovery.
Gigi, thank you so much for sharing your story. And to anyone that's watching, if you want to hear another story of recovery from gambling addiction, then check out this video and let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.